virtual event. My name is Jody Madler, and I am the Executive Director of Advancement Alumni Engagement at IES Abroad. Today's event is only one of the benefits available to our IES Abroad Global Alumni and Friends community. Before we begin, I invite you to follow IES Abroad Alumni on Facebook, LinkedIn, and add us to your LinkedIn profile. And also, I invite you to please visit our web pages via the links I will soon post in our chat room. And now, on with our event. It is my great honor to introduce Kathleen Diamond, an IES Abroad Nantes alumna who went on to establish a groundbreaking career as a consultant, entrepreneur, and business leader in the language services industry. In 1979, Kathleen founded Language Learning Enterprises, a successful full-service language company. In 2019, she launched ALC Bridge, founded to connect language service companies to universities and their language studies students. Kathleen is truly a pioneer in the language services field, and we are privileged to have her leading our event and our alumni panel today. Please join me in welcoming Kathleen Diamond.
Thank you, Jody. That was wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Welcome, everybody. It's always a pleasure to come home. And home is IES Abroad. It's just an incredible institution that has been around even longer than I have. And that's really, really a long time. So it's grand to be home. And what I'd like to do this afternoon, it's my great pleasure to talk to you a little bit about myself and ALC Bridge, but we also have assembled a great panel of other alums to bring to the screen this afternoon so that we can have a good discussion and get you guys all fired up. So if Dawn would start with showing this image, an image for me. That would be grand. Okay, so the person, as you're looking at the picture, the person to the very far left is me. And I am attending the wedding of the woman standing next to me, who is Madame Hugues. And then we've got two of my fellow class members, Holly and Maria. We were all together in Nantes. There was only 15 of us, and we were there from 1966 to 1967. So this photograph is taken at Madame Hugues' home. And as I say, we were all dressed up to attend her daughter's wedding, because this was the kind of person that she was. She just invited us students to come to the wedding. And I love the photograph because here I am. I really only knew her for about 6 weeks at this point, because we came in August, and this took place, as you can see, we're sort of wearing heavier weight clothes, probably in maybe October or November. But I love the photograph because already she was influencing me. I mean, I had no idea what an enormous influence she was going to be. But this photograph shows I must have had some inkling, because I certainly was standing as tall as she and working on my hair. So she was our director at the Nantes Center, and she was absolutely splendid, regal and gentle, kind and firm. And she sat behind what I considered to be the largest desk I had ever seen a woman sit behind in the office at IES. I've been back and I've seen that the overall structure hasn't changed much. It's been updated quite a bit, but basically same structure as when I was a student there. And so I was really quite impressed with Madame Hugues. She was the directrice. And it seemed like she was in control, and it seems like she kind of knew a lot of things and made a lot of decisions. And she mentored me, but she didn't say, I'm mentoring you now. She would just say, Kathleen, c'est bien, tu continues, tu fais bien. And so those words just kept sticking with me. And when I got out of college and went back to the University of Florida. I graduated with my undergraduate degree and then went on to get a master's degree in 16th century French literature. Rabelais was my man. Now, not too much to do on the work, coming out and finding work in those days, but I did some teaching and kind of, did the best I could, started a family and, tried to get things pulled together, but nobody was terribly interested in me, even at the academic level, because I didn't have the PhD. So I did some tutoring, and my concept, the only idea that I had of not academic, I wanted to teach adults. I did not want to, work in with kids. So I could only think of Berlitz. Berlitz was a commercial language school back in those days, and they also they did classes, but they sold all those little books and stuff that helped you, learn how to say bonjour. So I went downtown Washington D.C. and I applied to work, and the guy that hired me, he hired me right away. He said, "Oh, it's great. You got French, you got English, you got Spanish. You're hired." And I said, "Okay, how much?" And he said, $4.80 an hour. And I thought, oh, I've got a master's. I've already got some experience. Seems kind of paltry, but okay. So as I was leaving the office at Berlitz, downtown Washington, D.C., I saw some of their brochures. And I noticed that the students coming in were going to pay $25 an hour for what I was paying, getting paid $4.80. I'm here to tell you, I went home that night. I poured myself a fine glass of cognac, and I thought, I wonder what happens to the money in between. And you can't explain it, but it just happens. I mean, I became an entrepreneur overnight. And I decided to, if I wasn't going to work for somebody else, I was going to create my own language school and, okay, compete with Berlitz if I had to. So as Jody said in her introduction, in 1979, I set up shop in my sort of little study at home and I looked for for instructors, and I found them in the Washington Post, got all set up. Then I looked for clients. It was the federal government. So I learned how to write, how to think. And the gentleman in the first place that I went to was the Department of Agriculture, said, yes, we buy language services. And what you need to do, of course, is to respond, look for the RFP and send it in. I'm thinking RFP, request for proposal. I was in. So the rest pretty much just brought me all the way through to the day when I finally left working from home, went downtown Washington, D.C., and rented my first office space, which included some classrooms. And I got myself a big desk. And I sat behind it. And I said, merci, Madame Hugues. Merci, Madame Hugues. She died. I never was able to see her again, but clearly I see her again. She's always with me, Madame Hugues. So with that, I'm going to segue in before I introduce our panelists to what has kept me very busy in the last 5 years, and that is the creation of ALC Bridge. And this is a volunteer effort, and I do this along with my colleagues at the Association for Language Companies. These are terrific people who are business owners, executives in language services, and we've created a language services industry, something that just didn't exist when I came out with my master's degree in 16th century French literature. So I'm very, very keen and passionate about what we do at the Association of Language Companies. And I just left a week's conference with them in Portland. So the idea came when a bunch of owners were sitting around, what's your pain point or whatever about your companies. And company owners said, we are very dry. We're looking for talent in our pipelines. And so I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, well, we really should be talking to the academic world. We should be talking to them to let them know, let the kids keep studying not only their language, but add it to all the other things that they could be studying, especially today with jobs that never even existed before. And let's create a bridge. So here it is. The next slide, please, Dawn. What is ALC Bridge? Well, it's a platform and it's live. The student goes in and learns about the language services industry and the huge range of careers that are available in it. And it connects the educators with the employers to help the students. It's basically all about the students. And the students find internships and they can, prepare themselves for a very professional career in language services. The next slide, please, Don. Okay, this was just created this year, only about a couple months, maybe a month or so ago, by one of ALC Bridge committee members. And I think it's just brilliant. The top is cut off by the slide, but I don't know how well you can see it. Can it get bigger, Dawn, or am I seeing it what the students are seeing? I don't know. Anyway, what this peak shows are the obvious jobs: translator, language teacher, phone interpreter, those kinds of things. But it also incorporates the numerous opportunities for students in our industry to do things such as be L10N producers. This is localization. Localization then brings you into all kinds of things like L10 engineers. There's artists, designers, publishers, multilingual DPD specialists, interpreters, of course, interpreter managers, terminologists, language managers, quality managers. Solutions architect is my favorite. I think I might have gone for that myself if I'd known I could get a job as a solutions architect. So this is an important image, and we're sending it now to our academic partners so that the kids start thinking, gosh, I can keep my language. I can be passionate in language, but I can also parlay that skill with some other skills. Next slide, please, Don. Okay, so it's a two-dimensional graphic, and it was designed by Adam Wooten. He's an ALC Bridge committee member. He's also a professor at Middlebury Language in Monterey. So what it's doing is it's taking the mountain, the peaks, and grouping them together, and it's not just hierarchical. It's got paths. So you've got the relative proximity path, which gives language professionals the opportunity to move in many directions from one role to the other, related. So there's related job titles that you'll see, linguist and linguist manager, for example. There's no straight lines connecting one to the next, but the proximity is not always possible, especially for titles that can relate to so many others. So it's a fascinating navigation when you come into the industry. The vertical positions, language professionals, have many opportunities to advance in seniority. And so the vertical position of each title is often related to its seniority. However, not always possible, and seniority of titles can be inconsistent in this industry. I'm a classic example. I started at the top. I first called myself a director because that's what Madame Hugues was, a directrice. And then I casually moved into president. And then, of course, I became CEO. Next slide, please. All right. So this one of the objectives of today's presentation is to really introduce the job board. So the website has two parts to it. The regular website and then you click on the job board, and it's designed 100% for our industry. And by going on as a student, you can look for jobs and internships. So the other side of the bridge, of course, are the employers. And you see the tab where it says post a job. So the employers have to post what they've got. I know they all want to go to LinkedIn and everywhere else, but they're learning to come to ALC Bridge and post their jobs. Next slide, please. So how would you use this tool? Well, you can visit the website to start with, bookmark the page, and then from that beginning, then you go over to the internship page and take a peek there. You can join, register, learn about the industry. There's all sorts of resources available on it. You can promote programs if you want. You can view jobs, connect with other people, watch a webinar such as this, stay current, and take a look at educational resources. So we think it's a rich platform. It's very underknown right now. So we're all working very much on trying to keep it, talking to as many people as we can, I guess is the best way to put it. I think the next slide, Don, could yeah, it is. So thank you very much for listening to my story and taking a look at this exciting opportunity for people. It could be for people like you as well. If you're transitioning jobs, if you're doing something else with your language, it's a place for you to go and take a peek around. So I don't know would you like to take some, well, we'll do Q&A at the end, won't we, Jody? Yeah, we'll do
Yeah.
Q&A.
Please put your Q&A in the Q&A menu and the Zoom menu, and we look forward to your questions.
Perfect. So what we'll do is we'll start, we'll just roll right in to these great panelists. And I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their story also, where they were at IES and maybe a high note or two. And then we'll come back and talk to you guys as well. So Holly, would you please go first?
Of course. Thank you so much for sharing your inspiring story, and thank you so much for inviting me to join this call. I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Holly Rudd, and I am an alumnus of the IES Paris French Studies program in fall 2011, which was a completely transformative experience for me. And I would say I'm also an alumnus of the IES BIA Center, as I worked there as their academic assistant for 1 year. And I think that was in 2019. So I am a proud alumnus of IES. I love IES. And so a bit about my story is I have a background in music performance. I studied flute performance at Northwestern University, and I also was pursuing a minor in French at Northwestern. And since a very young age, I always appreciated foreign language, and I always knew that it was going to be very important in my life, and that language was very important. I didn't know exactly how or when, but it's something that I always placed a high value on. So I started studying Spanish when I had the choice in grade school. And then I eventually added French when I finally decided that someday I wanted to study the flute in France. I didn't know how or when I was going to do that, but that was a goal that I had. So I started studying French. And fast forward to when I was a college student, I embarked on the IES Paris French Studies program, which was such a unique program, and I am and was so grateful that it existed, because it's one of the only, if not the only, program where it really makes it possible for performance majors in conservatory style environments to study abroad and keep up with their studies and their performance credits and lessons and whatnot. So that was fabulous. I was able to take lessons at the École Normale de Musique de Paris. And it was so transformative for me because I always instinctively knew that my music and language studies would come to eventually complement one another and come together in some way. And to kind of illustrate one example when that finally clicked for me, I remember being on my IES program and I had a friend visiting me she was American and she didn't speak a lick of French, but she came and observed my flute lesson because in France and the conservatory tradition here, music lessons are kind of open to the public and all the students can watch all the other students' lessons, which is kind of unique. So my friend sat in on my lesson and she didn't understand a lick of French, but somehow she knew exactly what the teacher was saying to me. Something about his tone and the gestures and the way I played the musical phrase before and then the way I played it after and how I assimilated the feedback and facial expressions. It was like she spoke French and she had never had an experience like that. She was like, I just knew exactly what was being said. How is that possible? So that was a beautiful moment and really just made that concept very clear to me. And I still remember that. So, I'll fast forward to a little more recently, one of my first positions when I graduated from my studies, I pivoted to a more traditional administrative type of career, not a performance job right out of college. And I was working at a music publishing company. And in this entry-level position I was responsible with my colleagues for facilitating licensing for orchestral and any kind of ensembles in North and South America. This company owned the rights to major orchestral works, and we also represented the rights of for publishing companies overseas. And I was kind of facilitating and ushering these music administrators through that process. And when I got the job, I was asked if I spoke Spanish because that would be really helpful for the clients in South America. And I kind of remembered Spanish from my 6 years in grade school, but not really. But I did speak French and they said, well, maybe you can use your French. So I made it a point to use my French. Anytime I had any kind of interaction where I could speak French, a client in Canada, emails, anything I could, any kind of opportunity I could carve out for myself to use my French, I just made it a point to do that. And I remember a client called from French Guiana. We weren't understanding each other. We needed to get through this transaction. And then I realized, oh, maybe he speaks French. And then we got through that. And so eventually my colleagues were calling on me for helping where French could be useful in ways that we didn't imagine before. I was helping facilitate communications with family members for an estate of a composer in Canada. And I was able to help facilitate that communication. And speaking French kind of just became part of my job. And if I would say to anyone kind of starting out their career or not necessarily starting out and you have these language skills and you know you want to use them, definitely just grab at any opportunity you can to use them because it will be helpful and it will serve you. And it really is very helpful in terms of diplomacy. Anytime, you speak someone else's language, and help facilitate something in their own language and they're not expecting it. It really helps, kind of get on people's good side, I would say. And I remember when I attended an IES alumni event right after my program, I was speaking to an IES staff member and she told me the same exact thing. And I didn't really know what that would mean in my career at the time, but now I do a little bit. So I can leave it at that. And I can bring some more nuggets to the discussion as we continue, but
thank you so much, Holly. That was so great. I mean, I love it. And it just sort of shows how, we just we have to believe in our language studies, right? I mean, it's just, that was a great story. William, can I call you William? Yes. Will you be next, please?
Definitely, definitely. Thanks for having me. And thanks
It's
for
good to
hosting,
see you
Kathleen.
again.
Right on. Really a pleasure to be part of the panel. And thanks much for letting me share my 2 cents, I suppose. I'm now part of IES Abroad as an organization. My title here is Associate Director for Global Marketing. So I'm a marketer. But I work on an organization called SAF. So IES is the parent organization. And it's, for those of you that are students here, it's similar, but in reverse. So I work with, and many of my colleagues, we all work together with students coming from East Asia and coming to study at Western universities for the most part. So I was an IES Abroad student in 2005, and I'm not showing pictures from when I was a student, but I loved yours, Kathleen. I studied Chinese, and I studied a lot of time. I guess the amount of credit would have been applicable to get a major, but the major wasn't offered from my university at the time. And I had the intention to make a career in global business and connections. And so I stuck around after my graduation and worked and tried to figure out how I can be competitive and build a career, and did so from Shanghai. So my interest, I'm just going to go right into a quick overview from my side, but my interests kind of mix together some of the global connections that we've talked about so far, and also creativity and cultural pursuits. And I feel like it's a pretty clear through line now. I know that when we're younger, it doesn't always seem that way, but a pretty clear through line now for me as to how my studies with IES connected to where I am now, and my studies in general connected to where I am now. So I'm currently on the marketing side. I had a career in Shanghai, living there for about 12 years, working in advertising and marketing. And language and cultural studies became kind of a two-sided part of soft skills and hard skills. And for me, the job market called for those things, along with the practical realities of creative production, and I suppose everything that goes alongside that from the marketing perspective. We don't need to get into it too much, but the real answer is that those language skills allow me to get into the door. So I wasn't going to get a job offer without being able to communicate in Chinese. And so that became the baseline that then let me go through all the other skills that we also need to get through in our eventual approach towards whatever career it is that we want. So I've done a lot of making videos and doing advertising productions over the years, and eventually moving back to Chicago. The role that I found with IES allows me to continue to some extent working in just that. And I think the big difference now is that I also work on a brand that I definitely can live and breathe as an advocate for it. But now, so these days, I kind of bounced around a little bit, but these days I don't really speak so much Chinese with my colleagues. I'm based here in Chicago, and a lot of my colleagues speak English just as well as my Chinese. So we do it sometimes just to goof around or to give me a chance to practice. But we're in an English speaking environment. But the doors that opened and the resume, the CV that I have now came about because of the language that I began with. And I think that still is applicable for someone with my profile for whatever next role that is. It doesn't necessarily mean you use every day so much as it's one of the the skills within your toolkit to eventually be a better candidate for the roles that you want to do and you want to have. I'll stop now as well. Sorry, I hope I gave some insights there. And as Holly said, I'll try to add some nuggets as we go.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. Again, I mean, Chinese, there aren't too many, right? I mean, Chinese speakers who studied language in Chinese. I mean, that's pretty, you're in a good place, I would think, huh?
Nice of you to say so, Kathleen. I appreciate it.
Aren't you called a sinologist?
As somebody who speaks like professionally acceptable Chinese, I feel like it would be bold of me to try to claim sinologist. Some of my Chinese colleagues, we could ask them about levels and communication abilities, but until I do a PhD, similar to what you said, until I do a PhD, I'm not going to try to claim anything more than one more skill, right?
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much. We'll move right on to Brandon. I'm looking at the time. I realized I spent way more time than I usually do at the opening of this terrific show. So let's move along to Brandon. What you got?
You bet. I promise I will keep it. I'll keep it short. Is it possible for me to share my screen? Let's see. I'm gonna push the button like it is, and let's see if it actually happens. It's always a two-step process with this technology. Can you see my screen? Perfect. So just to give a quick background, I did the study abroad program in the summer of 2014, where I studied at the University of Granada's Law School in Granada, Spain. And I can speak to the opportunities that are possible when the study abroad program is over. This woman here, if you can, hopefully you can see my mouse moving. This woman here, Sylvia Salterrain, she changed my life forever. She was actually my professor, believe it or not, in the IES Study Abroad program. And she taught competition law, and the Study Abroad program as a whole was international law. And again, a little bit more background information. I studied abroad after my first year of law school. So unlike undergrad, I hadn't even heard of it in undergrad, believe it or not. And because I went to Stetson University College of Law, which is a smaller private school in the state of Florida, everybody's talking to everybody. And that's how you're able to get, what seemed at university classified information. Some of these, very niche topics are pretty widespread because the campus is so small and everybody gets to know everyone. And one of my mentors, she was the assistant director of the international programs at Stetson University College of Law. She told me, she said, "Hey, Brandon, you should consider studying abroad, because at that time I thought law school was a little dull." And she said, "Well, this is something that'll spice it up. Trust me." So she signed me up. I didn't even choose the place. She chose Granada, Spain. And like I said, life changed forever. At the end of the class, and it was 4 classes that summer semester, and competition law was one of them. And at the end of the class, I asked Ms. Salterrain, I said, "Hey, I love the subject. I was helping my classmates during the breaks because they just couldn't grasp the competition law, which is very similar to U.S. antitrust law." And I said, "Hey, I'd love to come work for you. I have my little Stetson business card with my face on it and my email and my telephone number." So I walk up to her, last day of class, give it to her. And then she looked at me, and she looked at me, had this big smile on her face. And the first question she asked me, she said, "Do you even know Spanish?" Because the class was taught in English, and her international firm, it's Abago Abogados, is in Madrid. So, and I had to tell the truth, honest Abe. I said, "I'll be fine when I get there." Because at that time, I could barely speak a lick of Spanish. I barely knew my colors or the days of the week. But I knew I was so determined, and I just I just knew this was my big break. This is what my life's been waiting for, the greatest challenge, along with, an experience of a lifetime. And sure enough, that next summer, which is the article that you can see here, that next summer, my study abroad program, the next summer of my law school career, which is the end of my 2L year, she allowed me to come in as a summer associate, and I worked for her, and I did a ton of things. I drafted contracts for the European Union. I handled litigation between Vodafone, one of the major cell phone companies in Europe. Got to get some litigation action there. I actually prepped a case. It was a civil case. I believe it was a bike manufacturing company, and they were being sued, and we were defending the bike manufacturing company. And I think I thought I had a picture, but I actually got to go to court in Spain and actually prep for the case. So I thought that was nice. I didn't get to speak, but I got to go into the courtroom. I got to work on the case and work with the attorney. So here's another photo, if you can see. So this is Abago. This is Sylvia Salterain. She was my professor. I spent a lot of time with Luis Vericat. That's who, he was the litigation attorney there at Abago. That's who we traveled Spain going to court. And then Marta, I worked with her on all the contract work. So all the European Union contracts. There were also contracts for the European, it's the European Institute of Innovation and Technology. We also drafted contracts for that sector of the European Union. And then just to kind of fast forward, these are friends for a lifetime. So I give some, just to give some context, this is in 2015, and fast forward, this is 2022. So as you can see, that's 7 years. I mean, 7 years, but the connections never die. So clearly, that's my professor, Sylvia Salterain. We're all hanging out in Spain. I go back twice a year. And then that's Marta, who I work with, and just hanging out, and the bonds that you make, like I said, last forever. I became fluent in Spanish, believe it or not. The guy who could barely speak a lick of Spanish, and like I said, and it goes on and on. I also, after I graduated law school, actually moved to Madrid, Spain, for a year and a half, and I taught English in a high school there. I worked with the La Comunidad de Madrid, which is the city government, helping them implement a new education program in the English departments across the city of Madrid. And so I'll wrap it up with this picture. Everybody knows Javier. If you've been to Granada, if you know anything about IES Granada, Javier is the man. He's been there forever. I went back to see him a couple years later, and just still the sweetest guy in the world. And he and Javier always pushed me. He was always like, go pursue your dreams. If you've got dreams to live in Spain and work in Spain and be a lawyer in Spain, go do it. So it's that encouragement. It's those once in a lifetime moments that have shaped my career forever. As William was talking about with his resume, when people see that you drafted contracts for the European Union, or you litigated in a Spanish court, it's something where people are like, there's no challenge too big for this guy. I mean, look at it. Everything's in English. So, I mean, that's obviously an advantage for him. But so no, I'm just so grateful for IES Abroad. It did everything for me. It changed my life forever. It made my resume what it is, competitive. I studied Spanish as a result of it. And I couldn't be more grateful and more blessed for my time there. So, thank you.
Oye, hombre, pero fantástico. ¡Uh! Wow. Jody, you've got some good alums. I mean, we're all just so, I mean, we're just all hashtag blessed. Here we are. You know, it's just incredible. Tatiana, you're up. You got to close us.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for allowing me to join. A little bit about me. I am the marketing specialist of alumni engagement here at IES Abroad, which is a crazy dream for me. I am a Freiburg alum. I went through in fall of 2014. I went through Elmhurst College, which is a small private school in Illinois, which had a surprising focus on international studies. But my dream growing up, I'm half German and half American. So a big part of what I kind of wanted to do in life was figure out how can I be a business person and use languages. And I didn't really know that. My parents were German professors, really focused obviously on the English side, but when you speak it at home and you're also studying it, that doesn't mean you're really prepared for the real world. So going through IES was something that I really wanted to do specifically in Freiburg because the program was very specific to the German language that I was hoping to utilize, but also it had a very unique focus and would allow me to do exactly what I was hoping to do with my degree, which was studying international business with a focus on German and international marketing. And during my time at IES, I had such a great time figuring out what my identity was, which was a very unique experience. Also working very, very specifically, not on the colloquial language, but on business words, actual terminology within marketing and international business. And I actually had the opportunity to take a master's course in German at the university as well, which really allowed me to do something that I honestly don't think I would have ever had the opportunity to do. I was very lucky also to meet people outside of the program, obviously meet the fabulous people within my program as well, who I still think about constantly. But just a huge point of this was really to figure out how can I do what I want to. And I'd never seen anyone who had gone and utilized languages like I really hoped to and kind of use that intercultural experience. And I had always thought maybe I'll be that American who could join a German company. Wouldn't that be really cool? But I've ended up kind of doing a whole bunch of different things with my career, mixing internationalism with German skills, moving to Paris after graduating and actually picking up the French language and then using my English and German skills to work in French companies, such as a marketing company on the Champs-Élysées, where I was able to use English and slowly grow my French experience with my German. And then eventually over time, focusing on the translation and transcreation of websites and materials for just a completely French company where I had to use French 24/7. It was kind of crazy, and that's not something I would have expected to do, especially as someone who was only 23 at the time. But kind of going further, I eventually ended up back in America, kind of finding something that I thought was a dream job for me, which was working for a German language and intercultural company, heading their US marketing, and then kind of having a boss in Germany telling me to do things in German, translating that to my English colleagues, and also work with our French company. And it was such a unique experience being able to do all three at the same time. I moved on from that and worked at a language and cultural center in French. So I was using multilingual marketing, which was really going back and forth between English and French all the time, and then using French vocabulary within English posts, and obviously reaching out to American audiences who love French things, and then kind of moving into the intercultural world. I do have to say, while living in France, I realized that I had a really unique experience with IES because I went through and was able to learn so much about what it's like to be abroad, what it's like to be abroad as someone who's never been abroad before, I was really lucky that I had that most of my life, but not a lot of people around me had. So I started when I was in Paris, kind of learning the French language for the first time and seeing what other people were doing, kind of growing into a new culture. I started a blog for people who are just culturally curious, and that's kind of something that has always excited me to also help people who are moving to other countries learn about what other countries are like, what they do with their lives, how they identify, how they learn new languages, and also kind of building on that intercultural skill set.
Well, I mean, I just will say right off, I mean, combining French and German, I mean, kudos to you, Tatiana. I mean, I have Spanish and French. A lot of people have Spanish and French, but German and French, well done. Well done. That is fantastic. Okay, so Jody, we have 10 minutes that we can actually take questions and engage the attendees, or we can talk among ourselves, or however you wish to use this last few great minutes.
That's great. First of all, thank you to our panelists. It's wonderful to have this breadth of our programs represented, and then your professional experiences and how you have used your languages accordingly. And I'm now excited to get to introduce my colleague, Megan Harrington, who is going to lead our questions and answer session.
Great.
So please don't be shy. You have so much expertise and experience before you, everyone who is attending, and please share your questions. And Megan, take it away.
Thanks, Jody. And thanks to you, Kathleen, and to all the panelists for joining us today, and all of those who are joining as well to hear some insight. We have a couple questions. We're going to start off with this one from Jay. How has the rapid expansion of artificial intelligence across multiple industry sectors impacted ALC's mission? And will the industry positions listed on Kathleen's slides still be relevant as large language models are deployed more frequently in language production workflows? We're starting off with a tough one here.
We are totally au courant, and we're starting out with the issue. And as I said, I just returned from our annual summit in Portland, Oregon, and key topic, obviously. And the message that I want young people, all of you, to hear today is that we don't be afraid of AI, because what we have in language is the human skill. And as AI develops and works, it's going to have humans right there next to it. So some of those job positions that you saw, solutions architect, for example, could be working behind the scenes as to how to bring AI into our industry. We need it, we use it, but not in the operating room, not in the courtroom. Brandon, we don't want AI in the courtroom. Any place where language matters, where communication matters, we have to be. But we can use the tool. I'll give you an example. Back when I started my company, the invention that I had was giving access to individuals to interpreters over the phone in real time. It sounds so archaic and so old at this point, but it was such challenging innovation because we were using computer telephony. And we were connecting these people across time zones, across the world. It was a third party, three-way conference call, basically. So at the time, it just seemed like, oh, no. Now the interpreters are never going to come to us anymore. We're never going to have the interpreters on site. Well, we've moved all the way through the access and use of technology in this industry, from over the phone to now virtual remote interpreting. The pandemic helped us because we were forced to be able to move and use technology and come to you the way I'm coming to you today, instead of always having to be on site. The other example is machine translation. Machine translation came in and everybody said, that's it. That's the end. That's the end. And it isn't the end. It just changes the way the marketplace is looking for talent. because most people who are looking to use a translation in any sort of professional, life-threatening way have to have machine translating edited. So there are positions for editors of machine translation, brand new positions created because of the needs today. So do not fear. Do not fear artificial intelligence, AI. I'm very proud to have been selected to be on a committee called Safe AI. And this is a task force. We've come together as interpreters, and how we begin to actually create some standards, help the government to understand when they should definitely be using a human being and when they can consider the assistance of AI. So we're working on it. We're not going to be put aside. Don't worry. I hope I've answered your question. It's
Yeah,
the future.
and I think William, actually, you indicated here in our Q&A that you would like to chime in on this one as well.
Yeah, thanks. If that's okay. I think we have a couple different angles on this one, and Kathleen, that was a super interesting take on it from somebody who's been running translation companies for a career. It's very exciting. I think, and tell me what you all think in the panel as well. But when one of these big changes comes through, it sweeps through lots of different portions of the economy, and then somehow at the end of the day, there's also a practical, like maybe a step back to say, well, we still also are going to need to, and this is what maybe the quick bullet point of what I wanted to say, that eventually there's language that goes in front of people in different places. And the practical example we run some websites that both create content in the local language and then also distribute content across different languages from the Study Abroad Foundation side. So when we're managing content from Chicago here that connects to Korean students or Japanese students, we do use a variety of tools. Both we've played around with LLM stuff, but not for our key information, obviously. And then we also work with translation. And one of the practical realities of implementing any of this is that somehow somebody's going to need to put their eyes on it. And somehow also you're not going to publish information that a language model has produced for you. So it becomes a really useful tool as part of the overall structure. And maybe it's Jay's question super exciting because it's more directly applicable to the language industry itself, but it changes as opposed to destroys, right? It just adds different complexity and maybe eventually allows us to do a lot more when you think about the people that are using language in different ways. Those are my 2 cents on it. I think it's a very exciting thing, and it's something that everybody welcomes with open arms, but looks at and wants to understand as opposed to is worried about.
So we agree, it's exciting.
So we only have about 3 minutes left. We're going to take a little bit of a pivot. There's a bit of a conversation going on in the chat right now about universities cutting back on their language learning programs and how you're able to keep up or learn those languages before studying abroad. And I would add, continue that learning when you get back. So I would love to hear from all of you. I think Brandon's a great place to start on this one because you did not have a lot of Spanish background before you went to Granada. One, how you were able to pick it up, what tools you have used since, and then for everyone else, maybe how you've been able to, outside of your professional opportunities, maintain those language skills.
Listen, it was something I can just remember because I was in law school at the time. So this is the whole study abroad experience. It was the summer of me going into my second year of law school. And I found out that I got the job somewhere around, I think it was probably December-ish, January-ish of the next year. And so, but at that whole time, I had faith that I was going to get this job. She was just saying, send me all your documentation, your resume, all these things. So at that point, I'm not taking Spanish classes in law school, but I knew I really wanted this international law firm job, even though it was in Spain and Spanish was a requirement. So, I hired a Spanish tutor. I went to Barnes and Noble at the time. I don't know if you all remember Rosetta Stone. I don't think they're running commercials anymore for it. But at the time, I thought I got a sweet deal because I got a 50% off and it was still $500. But still got Rosetta Stone. I'm doing that. I bought books. So I was reading books. I actually traveled to Cuba for a week, and it was through the international programs at Stetson. I got to travel to Cuba where I got to practice my Spanish even more. So I immersed myself in a Spanish speaking environment, and I called it like my quiz. It was like my test, so to speak, to see how well my Spanish was, because that trip was in March, April, and my job started in June. So I remember just studying all day, and then and I know this is going to sound crazy, from about midnight to 4 a.m., probably 3-4 times a week, I was in the library studying Spanish, because at about midnight, that's when all my studies for my law school classes ended. And then I would just, I'd just be there in the library, just studying whatever Spanish I could, whether it was reading Rosetta Stone, what have you. So, when you're determined, you'll find that you're willing to do anything that the job requires. And I wanted to go there and make, attorney Salterrain, I wanted to make her proud. So, although my university didn't provide me with the classes and the resources to learn Spanish, I took it upon myself to do whatever it took to get myself up to speed. And trust me, that's a lot of Google. That's a lot of, figuring out what are people doing to learn Spanish? What are the tips? And just kind of following that, and it all worked out. So, yeah.
Holly or Tatiana, do either of you have anything to add?
Sure. I would say I remember when I was living in New York before I eventually moved back to France, I looked for all kinds of networking opportunities. I ended up finding a French speakers in New York networking group that had monthly meetups. So just look anywhere you can, meetup.com, any other kind of circle like that. There are people everywhere that want to keep up their language skills. Also, people that are living overseas want to meet locals, so you can kind of find a language partner that way. And when Brandon, you mentioned Rosetta Stone, that reminded me that when I was an IES employee, one of our employee benefits was a Rosetta Stone membership, and I remember using that. And so you could check with your school or your company if they have something like that. I know a lot of language companies kind of have offerings for companies and professionals. So if your company doesn't have that, maybe it's something they could be interested in. It doesn't hurt to ask.
And we are at the end of time, but Tatiana, you want to wrap us up with your thoughts?
Sure. I would definitely say no matter where you live, there are probably people that speak the language. And if not, there may be really easy ways to just incorporate that language into your life. One of the easiest things, at least for me, learning another language is starting off with something like watching cartoons or a movie that you already know, something that's probably easy. I would start with kids stuff, nothing complicated, where you just slowly pick it up. And then if you're getting a little bit more complex, go do some research and see what's on Netflix. It doesn't have to be super complicated. It's just surrounding yourself with another language really helps to not only motivate you to learn more if you don't have that drive to really work on a language, but also you're able to pick up so many different vocabulary terms, or you're able to figure out what the grammar is like in a certain sentence. And that is a huge thing too.
Awesome. As a fellow study abroad in a German-speaking country, I do watch Bluey with German subtitles now to practice my grammar.